I'm currently in Swee Road where 2-year-old Umaisha met her tragic end at the hands of her very own family. She was abused, her body charred and left in a cooking pot for 5 years before anyone found her in this very apartment.
A 31-year-old man and a 30-year-old woman have been charged with the murder of their 2-year-old daughter today. The toddler was allegedly killed in a rental flat in Swee Road over 5 years ago.
But how did it take so long to find her, and why didn't any of her family members help? Tonight we are diving into the tragic case of the murder of Umaisha at Swee Road. Umaisha was born sometime between July to August 2011. Her father, then 23 years old, was imprisoned at a drug rehab center, and with her mother, then 22 years old, deemed unfit to take care of her, Umaisha was sent to foster care in November 2011, which could be a good thing because barely a few months into her life, she was given a chance at a potentially better life. I know sometimes foster care can get a bad rep for negligence or abuse, but some foster care's living situation are still miles better than their situation at home, as we will soon learn from this case. Umaisha was only reunited with her parents 18 months after she was placed under foster care, after her father was released from prison. One would hope he would turn over a new leaf and step up to take responsibility of his 7 children, but quite the opposite actually. So at this point, Umaisha was recently released back to her family because she was at a foster care home. But I just wonder if her life would probably be better if she was kept in the foster care and not returned back to this very negligent family. Almost immediately after Umaisha returned to her home, the neglect and abuse started. She often cried as her parents were unfamiliar to her, considering she was at foster care after only being a few months old. However, she wasn't the only one being abused. Her other siblings were also neglected and abused to some extent. Now, I want to give some context to the living situation in this Swee Road apartment. In total, 10 people were living in this one-room rental flat. 10 people crammed, squeezed into this one-room flat. Can you imagine the living situation then? I don't know, it must be so stuffy, so cramped and very messy. 7 children, 2 adult parents, and one of Umaisha's intellectually disabled uncle, all crammed into this tiny one-room flat. Here is an image of a typical room in this Swee Road block. As you can see, very small house. So it is said that the 7 children were not even given adequate food and water, and they were often left uncared for by their parents in their Swee Road flat. On one occasion, the woman's eldest son, who was 10, had to cook instant noodles for himself and share it with his other siblings. On another occasion, the children had eaten only sausages and asked a child protection service officer for water. That sounds super pitiful to me. Like, imagine being so... The house don't have water, man. Why does the children need to ask the child protection service officer for water? That's very weird. That's very sus. It was also said that service workers made 5 unannounced home visits, and during one of the visits, no adult was home, and the caseworker waited for hours for the mother to come back home. So the young children were all left unattended for hours and left to their own devices. Okay, so we are at Swee Road right now, and yeah, this place it's obviously a very old block, and most of these rooms, they're all like one-room flats, and it's a very silver zone. Like, there are quite a lot of senior citizens over here, and I guess it's a lot of one-room flats where old people live in, or they are renting this place. I just wonder if they know about the tragic history of this very corridor. Even downstairs, as we were coming up here, we met with a lot of senior people just sitting around, relaxing. So this is a very mature estate, a very old place. Umaisha was said to have been beaten frequently with a hanger or a belt by her father, who also punched her thigh and pinched her. Most of us remember being, whipped by our parents when we were young, or maybe beaten by a belt. Some of us, not all of us. And you knew it hurt, even when you were so young. But this feels 100 times worse. Not just whipped, but punched and pinched. And Umaisha was barely 2 years old. Imagine pinching and punching a 2-year-old child. Her mother was no angel either. She would flick her daughter's fingers and lips with her fingers, and on one occasion fed her chili padi to punish her 2-year-old daughter. Even if I ate raw chili padi now, I would be like almost tearing. Imagine feeding that to a 2-year-old. What the fuck, man? Thankfully for me, I wasn't really physically beaten as a child. My dad only scared us with a belt. He would just take out the belt and scare us, and then we would be like that. We would be damn terrified already. Like, did you get physically beaten?
Not like physically beaten, but like getting cane and everything. Yes. there's always the terror of you go downstairs, buy your own cane, and then come back
Pick your cane.
Pick your cane, yes.
The abuse continued regularly, and when Umaisha's foster mother came to visit the girl in July and August 2013, about 2 months after she was returned to her biological family, she noticed that Umaisha became withdrawn and less communicative, which was a result of Umaisha's parents abusing her. Although at that point of time, her foster mother didn't know it was because of the abuse. The foster mother must have been very devastated with the change of character in such a short time, because the foster mother was the one that was taking care of Umaisha for months, right, before being returned to her biological family. And to come back to, I guess, the child that you've been taking care for months and seeing such a drastic change, I'm sure she would suspect something was wrong already.
In these kind of cases, there's very limited things that the foster parents can do anything about, because after all, she is just a foster.
biological.
Yeah, she is just a foster parent, and like even if she were to sound out anything, there's also probably limited things that they can do, because even if MSF like comes in and like intervene and do house checks and all those kind of stuff, it still didn't stop this situation from continuing.
So the thing about babies and kids is that it takes time to nurture them. At 24 to 30 months old, they probably can't even string a full legible sentence together, let alone truly tell right from wrong. Adding neglect and abuse to that, it's a recipe for disaster. And this was evident with Umaisha's final punishment on the fateful month of March 2014. Umaisha had soiled her diapers, and being only 2 years old and unable to communicate her needs, she started playing with her soiled diapers, making a mess. Seeing this, her parents became enraged and began berating her. Obviously, as a 2-year-old, Umaisha began crying, to which her mother responded by slapping her on the cheek. And if you thought this was bad, her father extended the punishment tenfold. During this tirade, her father, who was on a meth high, slapped Umaisha across the face so hard multiple times that she bled from her nose and mouth. Umaisha collapsed onto the ground and started gasping for air. Her father's assaults caused such significant traumatic brain injury that it led to a concussive seizure, and that is just extremely tragic and terrible. Slapping a 2-year-old so hard that she had a physical seizure. When Umaisha's lips turned blue, her mother tried to resuscitate her but failed. The couple did not call for help for fear of being arrested because of the abuse. And also keep in mind that the father was abusing drugs at this point of time, so he was probably afraid that the authorities might, maybe do a house search and he might get arrested for consuming drugs as well. As a result, they decided to leave Umaisha to die. It was stated later in court documents that medical intervention could have saved the girl's life. Some of you may be wondering why no one else in the household tried to intervene, because there were 10 people living in this apartment, right? But it wasn't really mentioned anywhere whether Umaisha's siblings or uncle were present during the time of her death. Even though their youngest child had just died in their arms, their next decision wasn't to come to their senses and bring her to the hospital, or at least give her a dignified burial. Instead, what her parents did upon Umaisha's death was to double down on their cruelty. They placed her body in a metal pot and set her body on fire in the back of her father's lorry. Once the corpse was fully burnt, the pot was placed in a box, which was sealed with masking tape and covered with cling wrap. There was no dignity in death, and it was a total desecration of her body.
It's a very sad situation that, your parents are the one that brought you to this world, and then they were the ones that also
Give you so much suffering.
Yeah, and the ones that ultimately ended your own.
Yeah, I don't get it. If you're not ready to have a kid, just don't. They were clearly already struggling, in a 1-room flat, already have 6 kids. I guess it's just negligence, just a total, just don't give a fuck. Whatever happens, happens. Okay, another kid. Okay, come, let's have another kid. No responsibility, no accountability. They even decided to cook or burn the body in a pot. Can you imagine the smell of burning flesh? The body was then brought back to the apartment, where it was stuffed under the kitchen stove for the next 5 years. So 5 years, Umaisha's body was left in a pot under the kitchen stove. Umaisha was barely 2.5 years old at the time of her death. Now that the pot is back in the apartment, they had to make sure that nobody opens the box, and more importantly, to deflect questions when people started noticing that Umaisha was not around anymore. Umaisha's parents even warned her maternal uncle to never touch the box. It is also worth noting that sometime in 2017, the parents of Umaisha became estranged with each other and the father moved out. One would assume that at least they should discuss what to do with the body, which by then had been in the apartment for over 3 years. It's not really explained why Umaisha's siblings didn't question her whereabouts, but I would assume that they were highly suspicious. There were, however, a few close shaves where Umaisha's whereabouts were almost discovered. In 2017, Umaisha's uncle nearly threw the box away after discovering that it was full of cockroach eggs. Umaisha's mother quickly stopped him and had the box freshly wrapped before putting it back below the kitchen stove and warned him to never touch the box again. In the same year, Umaisha's mother gave false information to a liaison officer from the Ministry of Education when they wanted to register her into Primary 1. She said that Umaisha had been taken away by her father as they were undergoing divorce proceedings. The officer did not follow up as a result. Another close shave happened in 2018 when Umaisha's mother gave false information again to Child Protective Service officers from the Ministry of Social and Family Development that she had 6 children instead of 7, so that the officer would not conduct checks and care arrangements for the girl. And when asked by family members about Umaisha's whereabouts, the couple either lied that she was being cared for by the man's aunt in Malacca or that she had returned to her foster parents. Umaisha's memory was about to fade into oblivion when the discovery. Since Umaisha's parents were already in jail and Umaisha's siblings were being taken care by relatives or social services, that left Umaisha's intellectually disabled uncle alone in the Chin Swee house. We do not know to what extent her uncle's intellectual disability was, but what we do know is that on 10 September 2019, after his sister, who is Umaisha's mother, went to prison, he finally got the chance to open the box. And what he saw horrified him. In the box, he saw what was a black lump that was damp and decomposed. Not knowing what to do, he waited till friends of his sister visited the flat. He then showed them the contents of the pot. They were mortified, yet unsure of its contents. But thankfully, they made the sensible decision to report it to the police. Now, because the story is an opinion formed based on incomplete information, there's actually another version to this part of the story. In another report, Umaisha's uncle, who was intellectually disabled, decided to put the body into a metal cooking pot and started cooking it because he was unable to differentiate between edible food and the body. This resulted in a pungent smell which alerted the neighbors, who then called the police. But it sounds to me that the first story was more plausible. By the time the body was discovered, both of Umaisha's parents were already in jail. An autopsy of the girl showed that the body was severely charred and her skin completely removed. Her hands and feet could not be identified as the body was at an advanced stage of decomposition. Only a few bone fragments and teeth could be recovered from the corpse. Since both parents were already incarcerated by the time Umaisha's body was discovered, they were slapped with even more charges. The prosecution sought a sentence of between 20.5 years and 21.5 years imprisonment and 18 strokes of the cane for Umaisha's father, highlighting the aggravating factors of the case, including the absence of remorse for killing her and his continued acts of committing crimes during the next few years after killing Umaisha. In total, Umaisha's father, then 35 years old, was sentenced to 21.5 years in prison and 18 strokes of the cane. As for Umaisha's mother, she faced a total of 12 charges, including those of child abuse, perverting the cause of justice, and for giving false information to the authorities. The judge pointed out that even when Umaisha was on the verge of dying, her mother chose to turn a blind eye and leave her to die, and even took steps to hide the truth, and it thus turned into an irreversible tragedy. On 7 February 2024, nearly 10 years after she murdered her daughter, Umaisha's mother, then 35 years old, pleaded guilty to 4 charges of abusing her children and perverting justice. She was sentenced to 14 years imprisonment. Now, when news broke out that a body of a child was found in a cooking pot, the public was expectantly outraged. How did the system fail this poor child? 5 years is a really long time to be unaccounted for, especially in Singapore, where we pride ourselves with an efficient government body. How did the siblings of Umaisha not say anything? Preschool, kindergarten, and even primary school failed to spot that she was missing, just believing the words of her mother, who said she went to Malacca to live with relatives. It could have been easy to find out if she had at least left the country. Several people went to the flat to place toys and gifts outside to pay respects and show sympathy to the deceased victim. A Buddhist monk even gave prayers outside the unit and left a bouquet of flowers with a handwritten note that said 小妹妹一路走好, which roughly translates to safe journey to heaven, little girl. A truly sad and touching story. And that's the story of the murder of Umaisha at Chin Swee Road. Again, if any of you are experiencing any sort of abuse, please report it to the authorities or child protection services officers. There are always people around to help. I don't think you should just tolerate the abuse if it gets out of hand. And yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys soon.